I guess the reason I'm doing these, well, I don't know why I'm doing these videos. I feel like it. But one of the things that prompted me to do was reading that article in the Washington Post about the Open Syllabus Explorer and the results of their scanning, I suppose, all the syllabi in American colleges, universities, and finding out what books are actually being assigned to students to read. And my delight and surprise and to a certain extent dismay, I have to admit, in seeing that the Republic is like number two. We're all reading the Republic in America. Who would have thought? We Americans, with our dislike of philosophy and history, would be the ones who are doing our part to keep love of Plato alive. I mean, it's just great. It just upends so many prejudices. I mean, there's something going on. Americans want to read the Republic. It's great. But as somebody, I guess, who's read the Republic and discussed the Republic with students for so many years, I suppose I also have my own ideas about what it's really about. And I wonder what people are talking about, I mean, of course, the book is so rich, you can get so much out of it. There's no one thing or even one set of things that you need to understand or to discuss in depth to get some real profit out of reading the Republic. But we all have our own ideas. So we teachers about what's important, and we think it's important for our students to get these things. Probably not, In any case, as I'm wondering, what is it about the Republic that has captured the imaginations of American educators? Well, it has to have something to do with what's in Book 7, the so-called allegory of the cave. I mean, if there's one thing that people know about the Republic, oftentimes people who haven't read a word of it, they've heard about this story of the cave. And I would suspect that if it weren't for that story of the cave being in there, that the Republic would not be on so many syllabi in American colleges and universities. That there's something about that story and its message that we find very compelling and important. And we think, both as students and teachers, that it's an important thing to think about. And I would have to agree. It is. Sometimes, as a teacher, a longtime teacher of the Republic, or at least, somebody who assigns it to students in various types of classes and asks them to read it and discusses it with them, I think sometimes that's kind of a curse, the Republic. Everybody knows the story of the cave, and you can really only understand what Plato's getting at, I think, if you put it in the context of the rest of the book, which is one of the advantages of actually reading the book, is that other people may be aware of the so-called allegory of the cave, but from reading it why it's there and really what prompted it and what Plato is getting at to a much more enlightened way than just knowing about the story. And it's a story, and it's more than a story, it's an image. It's a poetic image of great power. The image of prisoners living in the darkness and chained up, unable to move their heads, so they're forced to look at a wall. Those of you who have seen the great Stanley Kubrick movie, A Clockwork Orange, might think of poor Malcolm McDowell being forced to watch scenes of violence as part of his his programming, whatever. You should see the film. I mean, horrible film, but a great film, Clockwork Orange. And that those prisoners forced to look at a wall, and the way that it does sort of appeal to our notion of, well, if that's all I ever saw, I mean, that's what I would consider to be real. I say it's an appealing notion because I've had generations of students who've made similar remarks. That is, that you will assume to be true and real that which you are confined to in your grasp of reality. Your upbringing, your environment, your own thinking is bounded in a certain way, and you cannot be blamed for not realizing that there's more to the world and truth and yourself if you are confined your whole life to one small thing. Well, that was certainly part of major thing that Plato's getting at in that story. But what makes it so inspiring is the notion that you can get out of the cave. That some, in some inexplicable way, because really, how would you get out of the cave if you were there? How would you realize that which you were assuming to be the length and breadth of what is real is really not? It's only a tiny portion of it. How would you really realize that? Well, Plato cheats in the allegory. Somebody frees you. Well, I guess that could be a great teacher or something, or a great influence in your life. It could be reading a book or seeing a film or hearing some music that let you know that there was more to the world than you thought there was. It could be your parents who instill a questioning and searching part of your mind. But in any case, it's mysterious. How do we realize that there's more? It seems to be that is education, right? But education then is not just getting facts and getting skills that'll enable you to get a good job. Education is enlightenment. It's getting out from the narrow confines of your childhood world into something bigger, more demanding, and richer, finally. Like the difference between, you're a little kid and you get that great book, you're 9 years old, and you get the book about Beezus or whoever, or, the pirate, and you love it, and it's great. And it's the kind of book that should be read by a 9-year-old kid. But then, you grow up and you realize that there's more available to you than a simple story. There's Shakespeare. There's a great novel. You love the Star Wars movies when you're a kid, or you love the Harry Potter movies, and why shouldn't you? They're great. But then you see a film that for grown-ups that's more demanding, and the acting is a little different, and there's ideas floating around. You realize, oh wow, there's this whole other dimension I didn't know about. Surely Plato's talking about that experience, in the experience of somehow turning around, ceasing to believe that the shadows on the wall are all there is, and painfully going up into the light and gradually getting used to this new world that's available to you. I mean, it's so inspiring, and that has to have something to do with the fact that The Republic is the second or third most often assigned book in American colleges. I mean, without that story and that inspiration, I wonder how interested people would be in the book. Of course, in the book, what is the reality that the philosopher or the person who gets out of the cave sees? I mean, what is it that shows itself to be so much more real than the shadows on the wall? Well, ultimately, and this is what makes the book highly questionable at the end of the day, ultimately what is real are the forms: beauty in itself, justice in itself, the good, virtue in itself. All these conceptual things that Socrates thinks are what the philosopher works to understand. The unchanging realities, we've discussed before. But the thing is that if you ask the very same person, typically, who loves the cave story because of its, its undoubted inspirational value about the nature of education and enlightenment, they'll be very skeptical about whether they would go along with Plato in believing that there is a beauty in itself, that there is a justice in itself, that is an ideal which is objectively true for everyone. In fact, a lot of people will just really vehemently deny that sort of thing. So on the one hand, this great story of the cave has this universal value, but then again, in the specific context of what Plato is getting at, you wonder if you really buy it. Is there a light outside the cave which represents true enlightenment, knowledge, and truth? I don't know.